Rise and Shine Garage Doors is a premium garage door service company servicing the Twin Cities area of Minnesota, including outer state Minnesota and western Wisconsin from St. Cloud all the way down to Rochester, Minnesota. We pride ourselves on providing the best customer service in all garage door repairs. We take great pride in having a premium service for all of our customers. Rise of the Rooster podcast is here to help you improve your relationship that you have with the largest mechanical moving object in your home. Now here's your host, Logan Greene, with the Rise of the Rooster podcast. We are clucking good at what we do.
Welcome to the Rise of the Rooster podcast. I'm your host, Logan Greene with Rise and Shine Garage Doors. Today I have one of our owners, Alex Johantgen, here visiting me today. Thank you for stopping in today, Alex.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me as always.
Yeah, not a problem. So we have a really great topic that we're going to talk about today. It's probably really great for us because we're in this industry. And I'm sure a lot of people find it really boring until we get to a point where they actually need one. We're going to talk about springs today. So springs are probably one of the most important parts of a garage door. I mean, they're a huge part of what makes the garage door go up and down and not just become a mediocre wall. I mean, kind of in your own words, what would you say the springs do in the function of a garage door?
Well, the main thing that springs do is they are the counterbalance of the garage door. So they basically counterbalance the weight of it. This makes it so that you are able to lift the garage door with one hand or even a couple fingers. The way you know a door is perfectly balanced is just, by lifting up that garage door. If it stays when you lift it up halfway up, and if it doesn't shoot up on its own halfway up, then it's pretty balanced. Obviously, you want it to be light at the bottom, no more than 10 pounds, 5 to 10 pounds at the maximum. And yeah, so basically that's what the springs do. They counterbalance the weight of the garage door.
I'm glad you brought up the couple fingers because I have my grandma test would be just these two fingers lifting up the door. If I can lift it up with those two fingers, I know I got a pretty well balanced door, and I know even a grandma can lift it.
Exactly.
I was doing some research for this episode specifically. I came across some very interesting information about the history of garage doors and counterbalance systems. So using a counterbalance system has been a very common way of operating an entryway for a really long time. It is believed that ancient Egyptians built and used a drawbridge over 4,000 years ago. In the Middle Ages, the French actually improved the process of the drawbridge by using a counterbalance system with a bridge called a bascule. I hope I said that correctly. I did not exactly take French in high school, but bascule, which is still one that's pretty common today for drawbridges, where they use a counterbalance system for it. It then began to evolve in a lot of castles, and you can see a counterbalance system being utilized in a lot of movies. There's one that I remember in Prince Caspian, where the Talamarines hit this counterbalance system, and there's a Minotaur that actually holds up this gate. It's essentially a garage door. It's the same process where that Minotaur is holding up that gate to allow everybody to escape. And I think they've used counterbalance systems in tons of other TV shows and movies, including like Spartacus. I think they used that in one of their episodes as well. But it's been utilized in movies for a really long time, using that counterbalance system to make a heavy weight, and using a heavy weight to make it possible to lift a gate, a drawbridge, or even a door. It wasn't until 1921 when a guy by the name of C.G. Johnson patented the first overhead garage door. The system is still used today with extension springs. It wasn't until the 1950s when garage doors became a more common staple in home construction, where like a garage was actually attached to the home, and everybody actually would park their car in the garage. In 1950s, that's when a lot of construction was including that. They started to use an invention that was invented in 1777, which is the torsion spring. Then they started utilizing the torsion springs as well as electric motors to lift those garage doors very heavily in the 1950s. Today, we see most overhead garage doors are built with that same torsion system. While the extension spring is still in use, it is mostly being phased out, but it is not gone for good. So probably a little bit more information that even you might have known about garage doors.
Yeah, I didn't know it went back to ancient Egypt for sure. But they had a lot of crazy inventions back then, and
Sure.
a lot of cool technology. Even you know, how did they build the pyramids? They had really cool
Yeah,
techniques to do that stuff. So
for sure. We haven't even completely figured that part out yet. I mean, what would you say are some of the pros and cons between the two types of spring systems I just mentioned with the extension spring and the torsion spring?
sure. Well, the torsion spring is definitely the better option in most scenarios. It's just going to lift the door a lot more smoothly and evenly up and down. So if you're weighing options between the two, you definitely want to go torsion spring. Extension springs are a fine option in certain scenarios. Maybe there's a lack of head clearance for a torsion system, or in just the scenario, some a lot of times it's a lack of head clearance, low headroom scenarios where you have to do it. Just
I lost you for a second. I can hear you again now.
oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, I was saying that the torsion springs are definitely the better option to go. They're just going to lift the door a lot more evenly and smoothly. Extension springs can be a scenario where you don't have enough head clearance for the torsion spring system to fit, and you don't want to do maybe like a rear mounted torsion setup because sometimes that can hang down and take away from the garage clearance, or if you have a larger vehicle that just might be in the way. So extension springs in those scenarios can be a good solution. But overall, if you're looking for the best running door, you're going to want to go with the torsion system if you have the space.
Absolutely. Can't agree with you more. Um, I think a lot of people have some type of hilarious or horrifying story about when their spring broke, either in the middle of the night or while they were even in the garage door. But first, I would love a quick explanation to our listeners why a garage door spring breaks in the first place and what happens to these springs when they break.
Sure. The reason a garage door spring breaks, more specifically a torsion spring, is they're rated in cycles. So I mean, when they're built, the manufacturers are testing these springs um, basically over and over again to see how long they're going to last. When that torsion spring is going up and down, it's winding up and winding down. So it's constantly getting friction on the coils and stuff like that. So when that's happening, there's only a certain amount of time that spring is going to last before it snaps in a certain spot. You're basically every time those springs turn and rub, that's weakening the coil strength. So most springs are rated at about 15,000, 10 to 15,000 cycles is kind of standard for most manufacturers. But yeah, that's usually what you're looking at.
For sure. I like to tell a lot of my customers it's kind of like your tires. Your tires have a certain amount of mileage. Your spring also has a certain amount of cycles. The great thing is tires at
Exactly.
least give you a heads up. They say, hey, we're getting bald, there's some radial sticking out, we're getting a bump on our sidewall. Where a spring just doesn't give too many hints to the average Joe, but typically a good expert will be able to go in there, look at the spring, and be able to give you at least some sort of an idea as to whether it's near the end of its life cycle or kind of somewhere in the middle. Um, I mean, what are some of the stories that you've heard about people, heard from people about their spring breaking and what they possibly thought it was? For instance, I had one where a customer called us out and it broke at 2 or 3 in the morning, and he thought a shotgun was being shot outside of his house. So he called the cops, and then the
Yeah.
cops showed up, and he's like, "Hey, never mind, no gun. It was just my garage door." Any
Yeah.
stories like that come up?
I've heard the gunshot one a ton of times from customers saying it sounds like a gunshot's going off. I had one customer tell me they thought someone was breaking into their house. It was so loud, like someone was breaking in the door or something like that. But yeah, it is kind of a surprise for most people the first time they hear it happen. It's definitely not something people are even usually ever thinking about. So when that loud noise goes off, they're just like, wow, what was that? They have to figure it out. So
Yeah,
and it's usually not super prevalent for the customer to see what actually happened because not a lot of customers are going to look up at the spring and notice because you can only see that usually there's a gap like that in the spring. So it's kind of hard to actually pick out if you don't know what you're looking for.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even when my dad's spring fairly broke fairly recently, he told me his symptoms, and I was like, "All right, look up." And he saw that the spring was broke, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, that's what that weird sound was at 2 a.m." But yeah, no, it's pretty common for a lot of people not to notice that that's what it is. And it's always kind
Right.
of funny when we talk to a customer, we pull up or like, "What? Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my door," and I point up with the flashlight, and I'm like, "Right there," and they're like, "Oh." didn't even see that. It's like, it's
Right.
okay. Like it's our job to know that. That's how we pay our bills. I think, do you have any specific stories about with extension springs breaking, and then possibly not even having a safety cable inside that spring?
Yeah, I've seen the extension springs hit customers' cars. I saw one broke a window on a customer's car one time. As far as like damage goes, that's about it. I know I've seen them shoot clear across. They end up way in the back of the garage, but it did no damage. But yeah, they're definitely when they break, they go flying.
Yeah.
Especially if they don't have safety cables on them.
For sure. Yeah, to our listeners, the safety cable is a cable that just goes from the front of the opening somewhere attached, and then that cable goes through the actual extension spring and then is attached somewhere in the back. It's typically loose. It just needs to work for half a second just to keep that spring from flying all over the place. But there's definitely been quite a few doors that I've walked into and there's no safety cable. So for people that have a system in their garage like an extension spring, what would you say would be a great solution for them to make sure that their system is safer for them and their family? I mean, obviously we have the safety cables, but what would be another option for them?
Yeah, if they have the room for it, we always recommend putting in a standard torsion system. One, it's going to make the door run so much smoother and even. With extension springs, you have your springs mounted on both sides of the door, and a lot of times what happens is it's very hard to get that tension perfect on those springs. So a lot of times one side is trying to lift up while the other side doesn't have as much tension, so they're fighting each other a little bit, and you tend to get a little bit of uneven lifting as the door is going up. So it's kind of going up like this, and then that's just hard on your opener, hard on all your hardware, your rollers, everything. So in order to mitigate that, we recommend doing a standard torsion system where the spring mounts overhead. There's torsion cables that go down. Everything gets picked up in one fluid motion. Very easy for the opener to lift up and down. And just overall, for the most part, balancing a door with torsion springs versus extension springs is so much easier. The weight is spot on. And it's just a much better solution for everything.
I couldn't agree with you more. I like to tell customers, I'm like, the extension springs is like two guys lifting a couch. Hopefully they're lifting at the same speed, the same amount of
Right.
tension, at the same height. Because of course you get the short person lifting, they're going to be a little bit shorter, and the tall person has it way up here. But then the torsion system is kind of like one really big guy. They're just lifting it up. They're strong. They can reach all the way across, and they're lifting it up evenly and consistently. For people that have a standard torsion system, how would you recommend that they care for that system and make sure it is working properly for the long time to come?
Getting it maintained and tuned up probably once a year is going to be definitely recommended. Big thing for us is when we do come out and do a tune-up, we do a full 29-point inspection. So we are going to check the balance of the door. We're going to make sure it stays in the middle. We're going to make sure it's not too heavy at the bottom. If it is more than 10 pounds for whatever reason, we are going to adjust the spring tension. But we're also going to make sure it's not going to fly up at the top and be hard to pull down if you were to have to close it by hand. So that's one thing I would recommend, is just making sure that you're having a professional come out, go through the entire door, do our 29-point inspection, lubricate all the moving parts, lubricate the spring for sure, to make sure you don't have any unneeded friction or anything like that on the spring, to prevent that from breaking sooner than it should.
For sure. Anything that you think the customers can do themselves?
I mean, they could lubricate themselves probably with a proper lubricant. So if they have a good, we use Get Some 1000 is the lubricant we use. It's a great penetrating lubricant that gets into everything and really makes sure that the door is running nice and quiet and smooth.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great one that people can do themselves. I think a lot of people don't even know you're supposed to lubricate your garage door, but I listened to somebody else's door while I was fixing their neighbor's door, and the door just sounded horrible. So I walked over, I said, hey, do you mind if I just lubricate your door real quick? It sounded like your door was crying out to me and asking for help. He's like, sure, but I lubricate my door all the time. And I'm like, okay, well, show me where you lubricate it. And he just put it all in the track. And I'm like, okay, that's why. Let me please show you where to lubricate. And he got some of the hinges, but he didn't get all the right ones. And then he missed the spring. The spring was the big part that was yelling at me the most. So we want to make sure we're lubricating those springs, because that's a lot of metal grinding on metal.
Yeah, and another thing with that is, if you're going to have the customer lubricate it, I mean, we talk about doing the tune-up once a year. They should be lubricating it more than once a year. I I mean, we should be out there lubricating it for them and doing that tune-up once a year, but realistically, I usually tell customers you should be lubricating probably every change of season. So
For sure. Couldn't agree with you more on that. We talked in a previous episode that people truly should not be replacing springs as part of their DIY plans. What are some key parts that key steps that we take as professional garage door company when we are working with torsion springs that make it much safer when working with torsion springs?
sure, I think the biggest thing is we have a training facility that all of our technicians go through. It's a intense course that they have to go through with proper training certification, which is done primarily by our well, you're one of the trainers. You're a master certified technician by the IDA, the International Door Association. We also have 3 other master technicians that are certified that have helped develop our training, and make sure that we're doing things the right way and the safest way possible. Also, we have the right tools to do the job so that we're not going to get hurt. A lot of customers might try to tackle something but not have the right tools. The right tools are expensive. So if you actually want to do the job in a safe manner, you're going to have to spend hundreds of dollars on the tools in order to do it in a safe manner. So that would be my recommendation, is just leave this repair, especially the springs, to a professional. I've seen many scenarios where customers do end up hurting themselves. It's unfortunate. And then we end up having to come out and actually fix the door. On top of the springs, there might be other damage that the customer may have done along the way.
For sure. I know we put a lot of investment into some of the other tools that we utilize, especially for like big commercial springs. If anybody is in a commercial building and looking at how big those springs are, we have what's called a brute winder, which is a really big contraption that goes around it and does a lot of the hard work for us. But that's an expensive tool, and I mean, it's not that you can't do it with a couple good sized winding bars, but having a tool that also makes it safer for us. We just got to utilize the brute winder. I specifically got to utilize the brute winder just a couple weeks ago, helping at a commercial job, and we were able to put that up on our TikTok account. So shout out to Call Rise and Shine on TikTok. You can go take a look at our brute winder in action with myself and Andrew.
Yeah, well, for any technician that has wound springs of that size with winding bars, they know how sketchy it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a lot of effort to try and wind springs of that size, which is why we did invest in those brute winders, and they were not cheap. I think they were around $3,000 a pop. On top of that crazy drill you actually have to operate it with. That thing's ginormous too. So it's a hefty investment to be able to wind those safely, but we wanted to make sure that you guys obviously aren't going to hurt yourselves or fall off of a ladder or lift or damage a shoulder trying to wind springs that are made to lift hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
Yeah, shoulder injuries are the most common injury in the garage door. Common injury in the garage door industry. So
right,
tongue twister there. But yeah, shoulder injuries are very, very common, and what because of the processes that we've put in place with not only the training, so that we're utilizing our body mechanics in the best way possible. We're taking a lot of steps to make sure we don't have any shoulder injuries. So we haven't had a shoulder injury. Not at all since I've been here. I have bad shoulders myself, and I still make sure I utilize my body mechanics to the best way possible to make sure we're preventing those injuries. And if somebody just walks into it, I mean, I've seen new guys come in and they start just like doing it, and I'm like, yeah, your shoulders aren't going to last very long if you do it that way. And so that's something else, like just how we do those repairs on these springs. If you're not winding it appropriately, you can also get hurt.
Yep.
I even want to bring up a little bit like just they are confusing too, because there is a right and a left, and red does not mean right.
Yeah.
So that can get really confusing. Really,
that's a common mistake for a lot of DIYers or new people in the garage door industry.
Absolutely. I mean, spring replacement is a repair that every garage door company should be able to do with little to no fuss. Many customers are big on shopping around for price. Now, I want to point out, I've said plenty of times that we are not going to be the cheapest. We don't want to be the cheapest. With the proposed prices that we offer to our customers, and with us not being the lowest, what is something that a customer should be worrying about when they see a price that possibly looks like it's too good to be true?
Sure, I'd be worried about just making sure that pricing includes everything. There are a lot of customers that may give a price over the phone for spring, but it might just be, maybe you have a 2-spring setup and that's just for 1 spring, or maybe that doesn't include your service call, or they said that's the spring price only, so that didn't include the labor on top of it, or any type of warranty that comes with that. A lot of companies, you know, there are a lot of reputable companies, but there are a lot of other companies or people out there that will come in, do a repair for you, and then never want to see you again. So they won't leave their sticker up, they won't leave you a card, you may not even get the invoice afterwards. So that's something to be cognizant of, and when you're making that decision, is you do want to use a reputable company, because if you do have a warranty on something like a spring system, you do want to be able to get a hold of that company and make sure someone's going to be, you know, ready to take that phone call and run that service call when it happens. And that's what we're all about, is making sure we take care of our customers. We back all of our installs and service work with warranties, parts and labor through us. You're not working with some third-party warranty company or anything like that. So yeah, if you do have any problems with any of the work that we do, we stand by it.
For sure. You know, Rise and Shine, we just very recently revamped our spring options for our customers. I would say we are kind of well ahead of the pack when it comes to our spring offerings in the first place. We were well ahead of them beforehand, before we did this revamp. In your own words, what about our spring options that we are rolling out separate us from the rest of the companies out there?
Yeah, so most companies are pretty much only going to offer you one type of spring, whereas our company is going to offer you 3. The biggest difference between us and them is we're going to give you economy, mid-range, and premium spring option, and they actually are different springs. So while some companies might offer different options, they're not actually replacing it with a different spring. So what we're doing is we're going to offer you an economy option, which is our 15,000 cycle spring. That's pretty standard across the board. Some companies offer as low as like 10,000. Our next step up for our mid-range is 30,000 cycles. And then our top option is going to be 50,000 cycles. I can't tell you how many times a customer told me when I was running service that, you know what, I just had this spring replaced, 2-3 years ago. Why does it keep breaking? Well, it's because most companies are only offering this 10 or 15,000 cycle spring, and you use your door.
I lost you for a second.
Where we found that there was a need, and
Hold
like
on,
you
I
always
lost you
say,
for a second. I lost you for a second. You said you use your door.
when customers use their door like it's their front door, the spring's going to break a lot faster. So we found a need there, and like you always say, when you find a need, fill a need. So we presented these other options for customers so that when they use their door more frequently, we have cycle options that are going to fit that need.
Fantastic. Yeah, this is really exciting, and it's something that it does put us in a very different price point, but we're offering something that other people simply aren't. I mean, I when I looked at some of our competitors, I didn't see them offering a 50,000 cycle spring. That's huge when we consider what other people are offering, and it should be a higher value to a lot of customers that just want to pay it once. You only have to see our ugly mugs once, and then you're done for the next 10, 15 years. That'd be great. That's a great value to that customer, especially if you plan on living there for a long period of time too. We're almost out of time here, so I just wanted to finish up. What is one of the hardest spring jobs that you ever had the express pleasure of working on, that you were happy with the end result and how everything turned out, but wow, is that a hard job?
Probably the one that just stands out to me would be a commercial job. It was for a company called Yaden Domes in Minneapolis. And this was actually a door install, but we had to mount the spring system about 32 feet up in the air, and we had to take a lift up and get onto a catwalk. And then back then we did not have, Surewinder was not a thing, so we did not have a brute winder to use. So we were manually using these huge bars. They were probably like 3-4 feet long to wind these massive springs. So this door was, I think it was like 16 by 14 tall, and it was straight vertical lift. So it went another, 28 feet in the air, and then the spring lines mounted above that. So yeah, you're about 32 feet in the air. So that was probably the semi scariest and also most satisfying jobs I've ever done. Because once we were done, I was like, wow, that was amazing. It ran amazingly too. So it was really cool.
That's awesome. It's always great when a good plan comes together. Well,
Yeah.
Alex, thank you very much for your time, man. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise and your passion with us with Rise of the Rooster podcast. I'm excited to see where we go with this new offerings for our customers, and I want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you very much. We rule the roost. We'll talk to you later.
We're clucking good at what we do.
Bye.